And we're live. Hi, everybody. This is Charles Hoskinson, broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, always Colorado. Except for times it's not. You know, I took a logic class many, many years ago, and the professor reminded me to always speak in tautologies because you're never wrong except for the times you are. And you can see my French raccoon, huh? Yeah, you get a French CTO, you just start getting very French about everything you do. How's everybody doing? Y'all having fun? It's been a fun few days. I've gotten some off-the-wall crazy Twitter commentary in many different directions. I've never really seen anything like this. I have on a few occasions. I just blocked somebody over Twitter, and saying, "How dare you print a new aid out of thin air? You're a horrible human being." And then he hashtags the SEC and then all these other things. So I got a rule. If you say you're going to sue me or you say you're going to report me to law enforcement or crime or some regulatory body, I will block you, never talk to you ever. And there's nothing you could ever say to get off of my shit list. You're on my shit list forever and ever and ever and ever. 35 years from now, you could be sinking in quicksand. I'll let you sink through. Okay, that's just how that is. The amount of misinformation, FUD, and just pathetic stuff that I've seen in the last 48 hours coming out of this is extraordinary to me. And just shame on the people who are peddling it. It's stupidity beyond belief. You know, we said, hey, we have this network we launched back in December. And basically, a lot of people showed up and turned it from an experiment to a real cryptocurrency. Now, it's real because it is decentralized. It's run by a very diverse group of actors. It's a full peer-to-peer system, and it's just running. And at any time, any one of those groups of people, a subgroup of them, could just make the decision to keep it running and keep it going indefinitely if they wanted to. Okay? I don't decide that. It's there. It's running. That's what it is. Now, it no longer is coupled or connected to what we're trying to do with Cardano. There's a social contract about the existence of the ITN that is coming to an end. It's ended on the 19th. And we as a community have to decide, is it in our best interest to keep incentivizing the group of people who keep this network alive because perhaps they can provide value to us in the future somehow, some way. And we can think about it as a community, at least until the hard fork occurs. And if we can't come up with anything, okay. If we can, okay. That was the whole point. Somehow that got transformed into, we're creating a new coin. It's going to split the value of ADA between two things, and it's a wealth transfer to IOHK. Seriously, if this is what you believe, you're an idiot. Just a pure, undiluted idiot. Get out of crypto. Just get out of crypto and have some goddamn respect. It's so frustrating and annoying. You can say 7 different ways the same thing, and no matter what you say, people just hear what they want to hear. We created something with the ITN, and a whole bunch of people showed up and turned it into something else. And we as a community have to make a decision. Is that of value to us? And how does that work? So that's a question. You might have all kinds of opinions like, no, it's of no value to us, or yes, it's so valuable that I'll give you my left hand for it, and everything in between, okay? And it's okay to disagree. It's okay to have any opinion you want. That's the point of a democratic process. But then to say, well, because I disagree with you, or whoever's presenting what, you are so bad that you've now become a criminal, is it just extraordinary to me. And it just shows the childishness of some people in this industry, in this space. Shame on you. Shame. We have no place for this, none whatsoever. So anyway, that was my morning. I tried to calm everybody down with a video, and maybe that doesn't work. And, so I just be more direct and more blunt with people. The stake pool operators are definitely, the vast majority of them, interested in the prospect of finding something else to do with the ITN. They left their pools on and are right now keeping the chain alive for no money. Okay? That was their decision, not our decision. They're just running at a loss right now. And we'll prepare a hard fork and a vote system, and then people who hold data can make a decision what they want to do, whether they want to extend the social contract to include an additional month of compensation for that group of small business owners so that we can find something for them to do, or they don't want to do that. It's a vote, and people get to vote, okay? And we'll see what happens. And if it's A or B, it doesn't matter to me. I say, okay, it is what it is, and we all move on. Now, no matter how that vote turns out, a subgroup of those stake pool operators could wake up the next day and say, well, fuck it, we're just going to fork it ourselves and change the monetary policy ourselves and create our own coin, call it Cardano Classic. I can't stop them. Understand that. I can't. They can go and do that any day they want, any day of the week. That's the point of decentralization. So we as a community have to understand that that's where we're at. There is no top-down control here. I don't sit in an ivory tower and make decisions for people. The community makes these decisions now, okay? That's why I made my videos on propaganda. It's why I've been talking about politics. It's why I've been talking about power to the edges. It's why I went around the whole world, the 52 countries, presentation after presentation after presentation after presentation, saying, think for yourself and you're soon going to be in charge. And for some people, they're just so insular, they can't get there. And they start thinking, oh, well, that's great. I agree. I love the philosophy. So you're going to do X, right? And I said, well, even if I wanted to, I can't. That's the point of this, is that it's truly a decentralized ecosystem. And look, I can have an opinion. I can try to influence people. I can try to tell them A or B or X or Y or left or right. And maybe they listen to me, maybe they don't. But if they don't, they're just going to do their own thing. And understand that sometimes their own thing is not necessarily the thing you want to have happen. It's not necessarily the thing that's in your financial best interest. And that's the way the world works. Welcome to diversity. Welcome to differences of opinion. Welcome to democratic processes. Welcome to being part of something that is more than 5 people. That's just how the world works. So yeah, I mean, I know we'll get there. We will. You know, it's just a bit of a shock for people. When you leave the cradle, they have some difficulty with it. And as long as people are civil, I'll be civil. As long as people, treat me with some modicum of respect, I'll treat them back with respect. There are thresholds I have. If you cross those thresholds, you're on my shit list for the rest of your life. But outside of that, overall, things are working pretty well. I'm just perplexed by some of the beliefs that people have. And no matter what we say or we show, they don't seem to actually change their belief. They've just dug in and they're going for it. So much so that they're creating threads here and tweets here and so forth. You have to deal with these. And, it's the next step in the evolution of Cardano. We fully knew that this was happening. I remember when we started Ethereum way back in the day, everybody was friends at that beach house in Miami. And then money got involved, and then it became Lord of the Flies. And then all of a sudden it was a race for who could get control over those funds and push them in whatever direction that they wanted for power and control. And, certain sides won. And then they, for a while, went in a certain direction, and they went to a different direction. And then everybody was friends again, and like everything was great till the DAO hack happened, and then created Ethereum Classic. That's what happens when you introduce controversy, money, power, or other things. When things go a little bit more nuanced, suddenly people have to have an opinion. And then all those implicit understandings of where everybody thought that they were on the same side, they're not, and they start skewing a little bit. Great ecosystems can work their way through it. Great ecosystems find ways to overcome. Bad ecosystems, they just become self-destructive and they spiral into death. And so far, the overwhelming majority of people in Cardano ecosystem are still friendly and are communicating with respect, dignity. And that gives me a lot of hope. And I know there's a long way to go and a lot to do, but overall, this is actually better than my experiences in the past with other ecosystems and communities. So that's quite encouraging. I lived through the whole Bitcoin Cash thing, the Ethereum Classic thing. I lived through NXT's collapse. I lived through a lot of stuff in my career in the cryptocurrency space. So I've seen far, far, far worse. But I laugh sometimes when people say some just batshit crazy things, or they hold batshit crazy beliefs. Is what it is. Okay, so let's get to your questions. It is a wonderful time for an AMA. It's a beautiful day outside. It's always fun to talk to you. Okay. Hello, Charles from the Russian community. Privyet. Can you tell, please, can we count on the Russification of Daedalus and Yoroi wallets in the foreseeable future? I assume you mean localization to Russian language and Cyrillic text. I'm pretty happy to say that we have a lot of great Russians in the community. For example, Alex Chirpanoy did a really, really good job in his early days working with IOHK research, and that led to Scorex, and it led to Ergo, and lots of cool things as a consequence of his collaboration with us. And we've always loved working with our Russian partners where and when that makes sense. And it's a big ecosystem. It would be nice to ensure that we have localization, not just into Russian, but also into other dialects. We've been, for example, really keen to do something with Korean, really keen to do something in Chinese. Not just for Daedalus, but also full end-to-end documentation. So when the Treasury opens up, I think that it's going to be good business for people to provide professional localization. There is some conversation about community participation. The problem is that not a lot of people who are willing to do the work are actually professional translators. So you get a huge amount of variance of quality, and I can't read Russian. So if a community member helps with that localization, I can't read it to know if it's actually done right or reflects what we're saying. So sometimes it's a bit problematic. So you generally have to use a professional firm, or at least somebody that you trust implicitly to do the job correctly. They can do that. So we'll figure that out. We already have translated documentation Japanese, and we've translated to other languages. And we do have people on board who actually natively speak these languages. Actually, we have several people at IO Global who are from Russia and speak Russian, or from former Soviet republics and speak Russian fluently as a consequence of that. So it would be something we could actually edit. That's a language pair that we're quite comfortable with. We're very comfortable with Greek as well, and we're very comfortable with Italian and Spanish and so forth. And it would be really cool to have some time and some content in Spanish. Okay. And yet we also have a guy here, VTC. You'll see in the future, you fork your own chain. You're lying to people. Sold 500,000 ADA today, need to pay tax for it. It's like, okay, you completely misunderstood everything we're doing, and now you can't back down from lies you're telling people. So now you've come to my AMA to go continue to lie to people. Where am I? So there's no economic value right now in testnet ADA. There's no one to list that. There's no utility for that chain other than what we decide for it to be and the community that lives with that chain. And there's a large collection of small business owners maintaining that chain right now. And we as a community have to make a decision. Do we wish to compensate them to continue maintaining that because it can provide additional utility to our ecosystem? And that's a temporary thing. You've inferred from this that we're creating a second coin, that second coin will be listed on an exchange, and there's a plan for that. There's not. And that will dilute value out of ADA. These are all lies and delusions in your brain, but you somehow are so connected to those lies that you have to sell all your ADA, then call us all scammers, call me a scammer. And by the way, I'm not even doing this. I'm not actually doing anything. The community's making the decision, Mr. C. The community's making the decision of what they want to do. They vote A or B, and a vote hasn't even happened. So I'm a scammer and a horrible human being for something that hasn't even occurred, that's not even a plan, that I don't even decide. You're an idiot. You're just a pure idiot. But you can't admit that because we live in an age where no one backs down. When people are challenged and they know they're wrong, they don't say they're sorry, you're right. What they do is they double down and they say you're wrong, and truth doesn't matter. Objectivity doesn't matter. It's just, it's extraordinary. And I said as an offhand comment, if we found use and utility for this system down the road and it was divergent from Cardano, yeah, of course we could pursue something. There you go. But that presupposes that it exists beyond the 29th. The community made that decision. We found a way to create use and utility that does provide value for Cardano. And yes, it would be another asset. Tell me, if we created a stable coin, wouldn't that be another asset? Isn't the whole point of native assets on Cardano to have many assets on Cardano? Does it make a difference if it's a side chain of Cardano versus it runs on the primary ledger of Cardano? Did you fucking think that through? No, you didn't think that through. Not at all. You just want to call somebody a liar. You just want to say we're scammers and bad people. Go to Twitter and tell people about it. Go to Telegram, tell people about it. Tell all your friends about how bad we are and how dishonest we are for something that hasn't even occurred yet, a hypothetical that you disagree with. And if you really actually wanted to be productive, you could have held on to that ADA and used it to vote. But no, you don't want to do that. Instead, you want to basically have your cake and eat it too. Make some money off of all the hard work that's been done, and then say we're all horrible human beings, and then go ahead and judge us for things we didn't do. And what are you going to say? You got a rebuttal? Do you? Honestly, you're here. You're in my MA. Nope, nothing. That's always what happens. But he'll still be on Telegram and still be on Twitter. And for the next 3 years, no matter what we accomplish and do, he will forever believe we're an illegitimate, bad project. It's ego. It's emotion. You ask yourself, why do we have protesters in the streets? Why do we have so many people so angry? Why do we have people that can't talk to each other? They talk past each other because people are incapable of listening. People are incapable of having a conversation anymore. I've made a decision based on a very thin sliver of information. And then I'm going to go with that thin sliver of information and immediately infer value judgments about everything else in the world, whether medicine works or not, whether a person's a good person or a bad person, whether a company's a good company or a bad company, whether a politician's a good person or a bad person, whatever it might be, even family members, even relationships, thin sliver. And then for the rest of time, I have to hold that opinion. And if I violate that opinion somehow, no, I just can't do that. This is why we're in so many problems. Why do I get so caught up on this, guys? Because this only works. Cryptocurrencies only works if you work. It's not about me. It's never been about me. It's not about great leadership. It's not about finding somebody on the mountaintop to deliver you and tell you what to do. The whole point of what we construct as technology, the whole point of how we build stuff is that one day you're in charge completely of your identity, of your vote, of your money, of all these things. And suddenly you actually have to think things through. You have to be able to handle the new cognitive overhead. The fact that all that stuff that was taken care of for you by banks and governments and third parties who said, I'll just take care of it, don't worry. You're in charge of that now. Now, for me, that's great because it liberates me from the insanity that I live in today. This madness where every single thing is regulated to death. There's double speak going on. Science has become highly politicized. We have the woke virus now. It's okay to protest for one thing, but you can't protest for the other thing. You won't get a virus if you do that, but you'll get a virus if you do this. It's madness out there. And I think the only antidote is a return to objectivity. The only antidote is to remove human beings from the operation of the systems and let the edges be able to decide. Because I'm ultimately an optimist. I have faith in people. I believe you eventually can rise to the occasion. If you're not treated like children, you're treated like adults and given enough respect for somebody to say, you actually deserve the right to decide for yourself. It's a very libertarian principle, and it's how my country was founded. During that time period in the 18th century, everybody just thought it was preposterous to let the masses run things. They say, oh, no, we have to have privileged betters running things. the divine right of kings, the right of nobility, the good breeding, the good bloodlines. They believe this. They said, if you let the serfs, the unwashed masses, do things, run things, vote outside of very limited whatever you have to give them to prevent them from rebelling, within 10 years, the whole thing will fall apart. And suddenly we created a government out of nowhere on the back of a revolution that said, no, 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 everybody's equal. Everybody has rights. Everybody should have the ability to express themselves. And yes, someone may elevate to a president, but after they leave office, they're just like everybody else. That was a unique experiment. And then similarly, when we talk about cryptocurrencies, we're doing it all over again. We're treating you like adults and saying it's okay for you to be in control of your identity, your privacy, your money, these types of things. Guys, it won't work. It won't work if you can't think. It won't work if you just live in thin sliver land, and the minute that you see something that you don't like, you have a knee-jerk reaction, take your toys, go home, and set everything on fire, and call every single person who disagrees with you evil or misguided or a scammer. Okay? It's a fundamental truth, and the more you realize it, the further along we'll get. How many attendees for the summit so far? The last time I looked, it was around 4,000. My goal is 10,000. I'm going to go on a big podcast surge and see if we can get to 10,000 people. Can you talk about cross-chain interoperability? Yeah, we actually wrote a paper on cross-chain interoperability, and we proved some impossibility results. The beautiful thing that we discovered is that while you do need some form of trusted bridges occasionally to make these chains talk to each other, the stake pool model actually is an extremely robust and nice model to facilitate that. So we have all these stake pool operators, they're small businesses, and they'll run Hydra channels, and they're going to run Oracle services and random number generation circuits and time stamping businesses and so forth. It's easy for us to keep layering more utilities on and then basically continue giving them more revenue lines, especially if native assets pay fees in their own tokens. By the way, if native assets pay fees in their own tokens, as a side note, when you receive your money for having ADA, you get your staking rewards. You'd actually also get the transaction fee rewards from all the tokens on the system. So not just the stake pool operator would get an ETF on all native assets, but actually the ADA holder would as well. That's a really cool concept. But anyway, cross-chain compatibility is another low-hanging fruit. You can think about the operator basically acting as a bridge to facilitate the communication between two or more different chains to move information and assets. And then you can come up with all kinds of really cool federated oversight pairings to verify that the system works. And in some cases, as long as no more than n-1 are dishonest, meaning that if just one person's honest, the system will still be reliable. Your math is wrong, simply human, because we have decay. So what happens is that you have a high emission rate in the beginning. In the first 7 years, you'll get half the rate. And then you have this long tail that goes on forever. So after a century, the area under the curve is basically that 15 billion ADA, but you get about half of it in the first 7, and then the other half, it takes a long time to go through. Very similar to Bitcoin. It took about 7 years for half of the admission to be done, and now we're on the other side of that, but it'll take over 120 years before block rewards become negligible. And people keep asking, what is the inflection point? Where will they make money if inflation goes away? And that's transaction fees. So after 7 years, if we've done the job correctly, we should be a very useful and utilized chain with lots of transactions occurring, which means that those blocks are filled with tons of stuff, and every one of those pays a small fee. It is valuable. They pay a small fee. Summing that together means that the block reward should be still quite lucrative for the stake pool operator. So there'll be a time where you actually make more money from fees than you make from inflation. There's some sort of inflation fee deficit inflection point. But it's just like an oil well, by the way. If you're drilling for oil, the first few years, you get about half of the yield of the well. Then you get this long tail over like 30 years for the other half. It's the same type of emission. Hey, moderators, come on, don't be sleeping. Greetings from the Turkish community. Turkey is a very beautiful country. Amazing food, amazing people, incredible history, especially the 1,000 years of the Byzantine Empire. Greetings from the United Kingdom. There we go. Are there any major updates planned for Plutus beyond what has already been launched? Yes, we will talk about Plutus extensively at the virtual summit, Cardano Virtual Summit. You guys are going to like it a lot. Michael, good to talk to you. Greetings from the beach in Florida. Michael's one of the many doctors that follows Cardano, and he's a very good physician. He was also a technologist, wrote lots of code back in the day. It's a rare combination. Hello from Ireland. Connor, how was my Irish accent I did in my last AMA? Did you see it? Wanted to ask about security audit, which is non-static. Will that happen before the mainnet fork? No. We have an internal auditing team that does that work, but we won't procure an external audit for non-static, because I mean that's one of those how long is a piece of string type deals. You can spend huge sums of money chasing an ever smaller set of concerns, and it's better to run these things out through test nets and formal methods. You'll discover a lot, and Haskell does bias a lot of things that C++ and Java just simply don't have. I would like once all to do a very extensive end-to-end audit beyond what was done by Route 9B and broaden the scope of it, but that's a bit of a thing. Charles, do you think transparency is a strength of Cardano? Would the idea to gather all transparency reports like audits in a single page topic transparency? That's a good question. They used to have that on the web page, the Cardano Foundation web page, and I think with the new Cardano.org web page, it'll be somewhere. But it's a bedrock of the stuff we do. It's a bedrock of the ecosystem as a whole, and we try to publish everything. All of our code is open source. Every time we have an external audit, we always publish that audit report. We publish addresses and all kinds of things. The problem is that sometimes they're a little scattered, and so it would be nice to put it all into some bucket somewhere. But then, we have to provide some context about it and go through that. But overall, more transparency, the better. Come on, mods, do your job. Joe Rogan. Remember our quote, guys. Rogan after Gogan. Would you hire Nick Szabo to work on Gogan smart contracts? No. Nick's a brilliant guy. I've actually met him and interacted with him many times throughout the years. And he's the pioneer who basically first started writing about smart contracts. I believe the seminal work came out in 1998. And he was talking about an algorithmic society. He often is quoted about wet code and dry code. And there's certainly a lot of value there. And I think he'll like what we do because it's very close to Bitcoin, but it's like useful Bitcoin. That said, really the group of people that we need to hit the hardest are the Haskell developers, the Haskell community. And we know where to look for them, what to do to get them. So as soon as we have all the capabilities in place, we're going to be super, super aggressive with getting Haskell developers into the ecosystem. And I think you guys will be pretty happy with the output there. Can you explain the Yellow virtual machine? Yellow was a project done by Grigory Roshu and Runtime Verification. And Yellow was basically a translation of LLVM merged with concepts from the EVM. So it's a register-based assembly virtual machine. And because it has a lot of similarities with LLVM, it's very easy for compiler engineers to write compilers to Yellow. The other thing is that it's mostly EVM compatible. So if you write Solidity code, you can get it to work quite easily on Yellow, except for the really, really bad Solidity code, like the DAO code, for example, won't compile to it. And the point of Yellow was because we constructed it from semantics, meaning that there's a K definition and you can actually generate the backend from K, was to have a universal system for all programming languages, functional and imperative. And all you have to do to support a new language would be to write the K definition of the language. So, and then it'd only take a few weeks if you have talented people and good tools. And then you register that, and then suddenly you'd be able to write smart contracts in that language. So you write once a K definition for a version of Python, and a version of Ruby, and a version of Java, and a version of JavaScript, and then all the tooling is just automatically constructed. And then use something called semantics-based calculation to translate that smart contract to run on Yellow. It was an incredibly ambitious piece of computer science. We put a lot of money and time into it. We didn't quite hit our KPIs, and that's one of the reasons why it was deprioritized in the roadmap. But I have for years been trying to find a way to pull it back in where and when it makes sense. And I really, 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 really hope that we can achieve that somehow this year or next year. The RV guys are actually going to come to the virtual summit and present about what they've accomplished with K and Yellow since they were with us. And it's a lot. And if we can find a way to bring them back in, I'm all for it. I think it's just a beautiful enhancement to the roadmap. No marketing has been seen for Ada. If that was true, Sean, do you really think we'd be in the top 10? I think we've done a very good job of introducing the concept of the project to the ecosystem. The challenge is that we haven't really done a great job of explaining how use and utility is going to work its way through. But that will happen, and it'll happen commensurate with when the platform is ready for it, and it soon is. Actually, Golang was selected because of Grigory Roshu. Golang was his advisor when he was at UCSD. Yeah, but that's crypto.com coin. It's not a real cryptocurrency. Don't even know what it is. It's just another one of those project tokens. What are the odds of seeing Hoskinson on a ballot? I am definitely not going to run for office. Not in this environment, not in any environment. I love my life. It's a great life. It's relaxing and enjoyable. And, for the most part, people who dislike me, they have a financial incentive to dislike me. But when I run into people on the streets or they see me, they're very positive and nice. You run for office in the United States, first off, half of America hates you. Half of your community hates you. You're not just the other side, the other party, the guy I disagree with. You are evil, pure evil, undiluted evil, Hitler, Nazi, Satan, They just use these terms. They put your face on Hitler's uniform, and that's your life. That's before you make any decisions. Okay. Then no matter what you do wrong, you're deified by the other side, and you can do no wrong. So you have horrible conduct, and yet they'll all, as long as you're in power, fight for you. The minute you're no longer in power, of course, they'll throw you off the side of the rails. And if it's politically convenient to boost you, they'll boost you. So, and then when you die, and if you were popular during your lifetime, then everybody tries to tear your corpse out of the grave and pretend like you were their best friend. The cult of Ronald Reagan is the most recent example of that. So why run for office in that type of environment? It's ego, vanity, and a desire for power for the sake of power. And for what? So you can not change things? You want to change things? You get into office, do you actually change it? No. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, the system works the same way. Thoughts on Ethereum possibly pursuing ProgPow? We actually implemented a variant of ProgPow for an unrelated thing, and it's a good consensus algorithm. But the fact that they're pursuing it tells you that there's some skepticism about their ability to move to proof of stake. It makes no sense at all to go and do a proof of work algorithm if you think your entire ecosystem is going to move over to a proof of stake algorithm in 6 months. Why? Why would you even think about it? Why would you even have the conversation? It's a distraction. By the time you audit it, write the code, think about it, get it ready for integration, you're already on proof of stake, in which case you fired all the miners. So what you've done is given the miners basically a better algorithm for a competing chain, which will run against your own community, the people who didn't want to move over. So no, I don't think so. It's just bizarre to me why they went down that road. Hi from Iran in Tehran. Lovely country, amazing food. Beautiful place, great academics, strong mathematicians. It is really a shame that Iran is not friends with America, because it's a country that actually I'd love to go and visit. But unfortunately, I can't. But thanks for being part of the community. It means a lot to me. When will we have a game on Cardano? For the Legends of Valor remake, I've been thinking about Legends of Valor a lot, actually. It's almost like George Washington when he was fighting the Revolutionary War. He was always designing Mount Vernon. He was doing various things there, sending letters right before battle, talking about some irrigation ditch or something to his family. So similarly, when I'm waiting for a meeting or, I have a little bit of free time, I've been reading books on magic systems. I've been reading books on game design and, also just doing an historical analysis of all the major games that have come out since the 1980s, kind of walking through capabilities and thinking about different game design mechanics, like the concept of permanent death and the concept of permanent injury. There are some games that have that, like Diablo famously had the hardcore mode. If your character dies, it erases your save and your character is dead forever. And there's a lot of games that have done that. Permanent injury means like someone blows off your hand. It doesn't just regrow. You actually have to find a way to get a new hand, or else you live with that disability for the rest of the game. These are really interesting game design mechanics, and it's something that is underexplored and underappreciated. Good magic systems as well are underexplored and underappreciated. They have something called Vancian magic systems, where basically those are like D&D, where you have spell levels and spell amounts. So you memorize a set amount of spells and then you exhaust that resource, or you use mana and you exhaust that resource. But there's alternative ways to do magic systems that don't require that. So there's a lot of stuff to think about when you actually start looking into these nuts and bolts. And then you have to think about the game world environment. So is the terrain deformable, meaning that the player can break stuff like trees and wood and buildings and so forth. Minecraft is a great example of like ubiquitous deformity. Outside of the bedrock at the very base of the world, every single block in the game can be influenced by the player character. It's very simplistic game mechanics, but a very prominent game. And there's been some third-person shooters, first-person shooters, excuse me, that have come out over the years that actually allow you to destroy everything. I think there was one on Mars or something like that in that setting. I can't remember the name of it right now. So deformable terrain is a really interesting game mechanic because all the things you traditionally do, like, there's a puzzle you have to solve to open the door, to get to the chest, to reveal the treasure. In a normal game mechanic, the player has to complete that puzzle to get to the chest. In a game mechanic where terrain is deformable, you can destroy it. The player can just simply break the wall to get to the chest, and whether that's good or bad is, hard to say. So there's a lot to think about there. And then there's mechanics like survival. One of the things that was really exciting about the original game of original Legends of Valor game was that it was a very harsh game experience. So basically, you just arrive in Middle Dwarf. You really have no guidance. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know how the game works. You have limited money and limited resources, and your food and water bars are going down. You have nowhere to stay, nowhere to sleep. You just kind of have to figure it out. So it takes a few playthroughs to get enough game experience before you actually get to a point where you can just survive in this place, which was just delightful for a 1992 game. I really enjoyed that. It would be cool to replicate that experience with modern game mechanics of really showing that you're nothing. Divinity 2, Original Sin, that was another example where the player was in a very harsh condition. So you're kind of taken prisoner on a ship. Ship sinks and you wash up on shore. You're like in a prisoner's collar. You have the rag, clothing on. And it's hard under the normal game settings to actually survive. Like, you could be attacked by anything, and those things are pretty challenging to kill. Probably the hardest game was Wizardry 4 to actually be able to survive. So there's a lot of that to think about. Like, do you want to just have a hardcore mode for games, or do you want to have it be more casual? I think that games have moved in such a casual direction, in such a tight scripted direction, that it would be refreshing to have a completely unorthodox magic and gameplay system, and to have a completely unorthodox games world where you have permanent death, permanent injury, and also it's takes a few playthroughs before you get to a point where you actually comfortably survive. And maybe you're never quite comfortable. Maybe we can always figure out a way for that. So in terms of, can we merge that with blockchain mechanics? Certainly on the DRM side, it can be done. You can issue a game license token. It means you also can sell your game to other people and create royalty systems for that. And then, of course, we could consider perhaps in-game special items that only appear as a consequence of having certain things. If you actually have a token, you can actually get those in-game items. So that's kind of like a microtransaction model, but it can be facilitated with a blockchain. So once I've created it, it'd be quite a bit of fun to actually see if we can find some cool blockchain stuff that can be done, and write some sort of smart contract on Cardano that can interface with the game. Another option would be actually coupling a full node of Cardano with the Legends of Valor game. So anybody who installs Legends of Valor is actually running a node and basically supporting the network by providing peer-to-peer and relay services, not even knowing it perhaps. So, they just boot up the game, play the video game, but in the system tray, it's just sitting there maintaining the network. So even if it doesn't provide a direct monetary value to the system, it would provide a resilience and support value, because the video game would actually keep Cardano alive. Cool stuff. The name was Red Faction. That's right. It was Red Faction. That's correct. How can one play Legends of Valor? Oh, that's a good point. Since I own the game now, I can I can always do that. Yeah, if you guys can just Google Legends of Valar, download. It's on Abandonware and other places. Consider the original game to be open source at this point. I've open sourced it. Congratulations. So you can download it, the old copies for free, and play it on DOSBox, and you don't have to pay any royalties. It's all yours. There you go. See, these are cool AMAs. Like, stuff is actually done in the AMA. You're in for quite a treat. Did you ever play Ultima Online? There was Ultima Underworld, Ultima 8, Ultima 7. There was a lot of Ultimas. It was a hell of a game. All of the Ultimas. Ascension wasn't as where it needed to be. It was Ultima 9. Legends of Valor looks like Elder Scrolls 1 Arena. Otis, you're actually right. It was a big inspiration for Howard to create the Elder Scrolls. He played Legends of Valor before he created it. So some of the things that were in Arena were actually based on Legends of Valor. Legends of Valor was the first open world RPG. And if they had just a few more game mechanics and the game was a little bit more sophisticated, it probably would have sold blockbusters and it would have become Elder Scrolls. They are intending many sequels. In fact, Legends of Valor's full title includes Volume 1, implying that there were going to be multiple Legends of Valor, but unfortunately they never got around to it. Charles, will you still do AMAs when you're filthy rich like Jeff Bezos? I'm already pretty rich and I'm doing AMAs. My lifestyle is really not going to change regardless of how much money I have at this point. So yes, I'm going to keep doing AMAs regardless. And this is another reason why I'm going to stay out of politics. Joe Rogan has this beautiful, uneasy peace with the media and mainstream society where he's basically just ignored by most of the power brokers, and he's allowed to talk, even though he has 20 million people who listen to him regularly. And sometimes he takes very controversial positions because they understand the implications of going to war with them. So he doesn't say too much about them. They don't say too much about him. And he gets to be Joe Rogan. That's a good position to be in. It really is. The minute that you get too political or you become too inconvenient, then, the politics of personal destruction kick in and they go at you. And then everything you've ever done, said will be scrutinized. And then people will reinterpret it in the most negative, least empathetic possible way and destroy you. Charles, you should work on remastering Command & Conquer Generals 0 Hour. Generals was terrible. That was a cash grab from EA. Charles, do women and more possessions make you happier? No. Happiness comes from within. You should remake Deus Ex. Deus Ex is actually being maintained by a pretty good studio. I really liked Human Revolution and Mankind Divided. They were quite a lot of fun. Yes, I'll go on Rogan. Rogan after Gogan. You want to have the right hook, the right infrastructure. You only get one shot, so make it count. So there's a bit of strategy when you go on those types of shows. Should I ever read Steve Jackson or Ian Livingstone's books? I may have. Refresh me the titles they wrote. I don't think so, though. They don't ring a bell. Charles, were you an arcade kid like me? Yeah, I played Gauntlet. Remember Gauntlet? The 4 players and the old X-Men arcade game? Yeah, when I was a kid, Maui, we had this, and it's still open. I went Maui not too long ago, and I had a chance to see it. It was called the Fun Factory, and it was actually in the Kamehameha Mall over in Kahului, and it's still there, and they still have all those arcade games I played when I was 6 years old. And I've built gaming PCs, to answer your question. Greetings from Ecuador. Beautiful country, one of the most beautiful countries in the world. Hello from Okinawa, Japan. One of the healthiest places in the world, Okinawa, and also one of the most beautiful. It's a hidden gem of Japan. Good to have you here. Have I ever been to Romania, Bogdan? Yes, many times. I love Romania. It's a beautiful country. In fact, a prominent Romanian has made major contributions to our ecosystem, Grigore Roșu. He was originally from Romania. I also love Bulgaria. Charles, are you in touch with David Schwartz of Ripple? David and I know each other, and we occasionally banter from time to time. I believe we've met in person once or twice. He's a nice guy, very nice guy. I knew him when he was the security guy at Ripple, and then he became the CTO, I believe. He used to actually be part of the NSA. Can you talk about Caitlin Long's bank? I will let Caitlin Long do that herself. She's one of the smartest and best people in the cryptocurrency space, bar none. One of the most qualified CEOs. And, you know, if we ever had to elect somebody, go talk to the US government on behalf of crypto, I think she's actually the best person out of everybody. Set Andreas aside, set Brian Armstrong, everybody. I think she's actually the best person to have that conversation. And, you know, she's proven the work that she did in Wyoming is plenary and it continues to be plenary. And she's frankly changing not only that entire state, but the entire political reality of that state, and has made it a very friendly place for crypto businesses to operate, but with, of course, the principles of rule of law. So you can't go there to do crazy things, but you can go there to run a legitimate business and run it well and not have to worry. What do you think about the SEC chairman leaving his position? You know, that's a really interesting thing. I got blindsided by that. I think it was yesterday. I heard the news, and I think it's a contentious leave. So the Southern District of New York's attorney general, or district attorney, excuse me, I think is being fired. And he's also investigating Trump at the same time, which is extraordinary to me that you can fire the person investigating you. And now Jay is trying to take that job. Who replaces him is a big open question. It's so political and contentious right now. I don't even know if they necessarily could get Senate approval for that position. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say. It could go either way. It could be very pro or very bad for our space. I know that Trump is not a huge fan of cryptocurrencies. He's never been. It's bizarre because so many people in our space actually like Trump, or at least support him, or at least understand him. And then he goes and pisses all over our space whenever he has the opportunity. And Bolton's recent book has numerous sections in it where he heard Trump basically say, hey, when are we banning this? When are we taking this down? we need to destroy crypto. So that's sad. He had a unique opportunity to do things a little differently. And ironically, crypto actually agrees with a lot of his monetary views. Like he's actually a gold guy and thinks about sound money. So why then would he hate our space? I guess it's just a lack of information. Should I move my headquarters to Wyoming? Absolutely. Wyoming's a beautiful place. Charles, you read any research on computational social choice theory? Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff. And, there's also social physics and these things, this concept of taking sociology and network theory and complexity theory and merging all these things together. And then you try to actually model social systems in some way that provides some degree of predictivity without having to know the entire world. So in other words, you can use simple rules to reconstruct a complex system, and then you basically can reason about how that complex system is going to behave, whether it be epidemiological stuff where diseases are spreading, or economic systems, or political revolutions, whatever that might be. Let's see. We should send Max Kaiser to Congress. Yeah, Max is an interesting guy too. I like Max a lot. Max is great, and Stacy's great too. Max and his wife, they've been so kind to me, and they've always been friendly, and we have great conversations both on and off the camera. And I've always enjoyed watching his show when I have the time. No, the dogs are actually the best security system in the world. They always let you know when someone's pulling up. Charles, what's your favorite alcoholic drink? Well, I've been dry this whole year. Haven't had drink since December. I picked a hell of a year to be dry. I do a dry year and a wet year. It's whiskey. I love single malt whiskey, mostly Scottish. Macallan and Glenmorangie, and the Japanese stuff, Yamazaki and Hibiki. Still on keto? Yeah, I go from keto back to keto, on keto, off keto. Some weeks not keto. Yeah, Trump is definitely not about sound money. But he actually was a supporter of the gold standard many times throughout his political career. Okay, let's keep going. Ever been to Newcastle, UK? I'd love to hear you attempt my accent. What, do you sound like a pikey, Andrew? I've heard Brad Pitt try that. Charles, when mountain expedition? Yes, I will go to Norway, hopefully in August, with some Norwegians to go visit some of the old places and mountains that my forefathers went to a long time ago. Kind of a bit of a pilgrimage. Charles, do you like trout? Love trout. Trout fishing's a lot of fun. Catfishing is my favorite. Do it early in the morning. Get up 4 or 5 a.m., get some leeches or some blood bait, and just go sit out there on the shore, throw the lines in. You get these beautiful catfish. Put a mosquito candle because the mosquitoes will eat you alive otherwise. Will Prism be released by the end of the year? Yes, before the end of the year. Yeah, but you don't want to go fishing at 2 a.m. Come on now. Pikey is Irish. Charles, do you recommend a specific course to learn Python? I might actually create one myself. I've been thinking about creating a series on critical thinking, but a lot of people inside my Yamazaki and Hibiki. Hibiki is one of the most famous whiskeys in the world. One of the best. Amazing. Hibiki Harmony. It's about $100 a bottle. You'll never go back. It's as good as a $500 bottle of Scottish whiskey. There's few things that beat it. But anyway, I might create a critical thinking course and actually cite a lot of great books that I've read throughout the years. Talk a bit about data science and other things and statistics. Yeah, but it would be fun to do a programming course as well. Just time. Never have the time. Irish whiskey beats it. Yeah, well, Jameson 18 is really smooth. $100 a bottle too. That's a good sweet spot for good whiskey. You need to revisit your monuments video. I was speaking in particular about the concept of a very large mob burning down the Lincoln Memorial, because that would be such a significant event that it would be a moment where everybody could take a step back and reflect on what the hell's happening in society. It's almost like a catharsis, like when the Saddam Hussein statue collapsed or the old communist monuments were torn down in Romania or other places. That's a singular thing, and it gives society a timeout. And you can always repair the monument and then basically have a conversation about what are we going to do moving forward. What happened with the Grant statue is that basically now every monument, every statue of any person is being subjected to such a onerous contemporary standard that if they peed their pants when they were 5 years old, then the statue's got to go down. And they're just basically destroying these statues, destroying statues of people that obviously were not racist. Grant freed slaves. He killed Confederate people. When he was president, was truly tested. I believe it was 1868, where he had to deal with Reconstruction South and send the army in to protect blacks so that they could actually vote and exercise their democratic freedoms and protect black businesses. He had to deal with lynching mobs. He had to deal with the surgeons of the KKK and actually shoot them. He had to deal with juries that refused to convict people for killing people because they were killing blacks, and basically have the federal government step in. This was not a racist person. It's quite the opposite. It was a person trying to protect the weakest amongst us and fought. And by the way, he was married to a woman whose father owned slaves, and he easily could have joined the Confederacy. He had all the connections and hookups for it, and his father would have gotten him probably a colonelship or a generalship in the Confederacy. But it was an unthinkable act for him to do that. He was loyal to the Union through and through, and helped win the Civil War for the side that should have won and did win. But yet his statue was torn down like everyone else's statue. So then you have to ask, at what point has a threshold been crossed? And firmly, I believe that now these protests have morphed into less about anger and outrage about events that are occurring, and more about a Marxist political movement that basically wants to destroy all of American history, end our entire system, burn our institutions to the ground, and replace them with basically like a neo-communist regime and divide all of us. It's extremely dangerous. And if you actually read the rhetoric and the things they're asking for, the things they want to do, there's some people in this movement want to charge a white tax. So if you're white, you actually have to pay more taxes. That's not the America I grew up in, to say that one race should be singled out and basically punished for things that people did a long time ago. In Judeo-Christian law, very different from the Code of Hammurabi, the Babylonian code. The Babylonians, the Sumerians, and the other Mesopotamian cultures believed that the sins of the father were also the sins of the son. So if the father skipped out on a debt, you could actually execute the children for that. Judeo-Christian law was one of the first legal codes around that said you are your own person. So if your father does something, that doesn't necessarily mean the son's a bad person. You can't execute him for that. So we now live in a bizarre standard where people who are long dead, 5 generations dead, the things that they've done apparently are our responsibility, and we're at fault for it. And we have to be punished for it or pay for it. And, we just have no notion of proportionality or the fact that things reset every generation. And yeah, there's certainly some systematic and institutional problems that do exist, But I would argue that these institutional problems are less racial and they're more about statism and more about power structures. Police kill white people too. I remember a swatting incident years ago where a guy was playing Xbox and somebody thought it'd be funny to call the SWAT teams on him and say that he had hostages. The police showed up and he was on the ground on his belly and told to crawl, and the police officer kept giving him increasingly more confusing instructions, and eventually his pants started falling down. So he reaches to pull up his pants, and then while on his belly, he's gunned down by a police officer holding an AR-15. That officer still has his job and is still basically living life just fine and even being paid trauma pay for shooting this person because he apparently went through a traumatic event. So not only does he have his job, he gets paid money for the privilege of murdering somebody on their belly after he gave him confusing instructions. So was that racism? It was a white cop and a white person. No, it's the militarization of the police, and it's a lack of accountability of that force. So it's completely legitimate to say that that institution needs reform. But to say the only reason the institution needs reform is because a particular group of people have been harder hit than any other group of people, that's like just like saying the symptom is the disease. It's not. It's a flaw in thinking. And unfortunately, what always happens with political movements is that the most dangerous and radical of political movements will always try to attach themselves to the most extreme and emotional events that happen in society, and then use that emotional event that really pisses people off as justification for radical change. And that radical change is not what the vast majority of us signed up for. If you think that communism is great, then go get the American people to vote and go change the US Constitution to enable it. But if you don't allow the pain, suffering, and tragedy of other people to allow you to somehow sneak it in through the back door and do a bait and switch and say it's for our greater good. That's what the Castros do and these other horrible people. And it's really disgusting to see what this has descended into. And it's a shame, too, just like the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street and all of these other movements that we've witnessed the last 20 years. These were great self-reflective opportunities for the United States to take a step back, slow down for a bit, and really ask itself, what the hell is going on and what are we doing? And who do we want to be as a country? And instead, like always, the movements are being co-opted by the worst amongst us to basically extract money and power from the most vulnerable and weakest amongst us. It's got to stop at some point. Max Kaiser does not like altcoins. That's not true. Max does take credit for being the guy who broke Ethereum to people. I was the guy who introduced it. He just doesn't like, and he also created his own altcoin, MaxCoin. You never say you don't like altcoins when you've created your own altcoin. The Austrian or the Chicago school? Austrian economics for the win. I'm more of a neo-Austrian guy. I think that if you can combine that with a lot of ideas we've learned from complexity theory, there's some cool stuff there. No, MaxCoin was a real thing. MaxCoin was a real thing. I might resurrect it just to do something with it, just to mess with Max. Charles, what are your thoughts about a crypto ban in developing nations like India? Will they ever adopt it? Yeah, of course they're banning it because they can't control it, and they understand that if it propagates, it will overthrow the nepotism and social hierarchy that they've set up. Anytime somebody bans something that's good for the poorest and weakest amongst us, they ban it because they want to preserve the status quo. They want to preserve their dictatorships. They want to preserve their social order. And it's always to the detriment of the weakest, and it's to the benefit of the strongest. And of course, they will ban it, citing protection of the poorest. Thomas Woods actually created that law. Tom Woods is an interesting guy. Charles, you're brilliant, but the gold standard is a joke. I'm actually inclined to agree. You don't actually need the gold standard, but what you do need is consistency in your monetary policy. The whole point of the gold standard was to tether your monetary policy to something you couldn't debase or manipulate, because there's too much temptation to use the power of the printing press, seigniorage, to basically destroy your economy, because you get a massive short-term benefit for a huge long-term consequence that oftentimes short-term politicians don't have to pay. Yeah, money printer go burr, $6 trillion. Quantum dot RNA vaccines. That's above my pay grade. Is it possible to use the ITN for a stablecoin? We could definitely do stablecoin experimentation on the ITN. And that's a great example of a potential use case and utility. So let's spend all of July talking about it as a community. And I think we can have great dialogue about it if we preserve the ITN. And that's your decision, not mine. Charles, what we do if the U.S. bans Cardano? Then the non-U.S. parts of my organization will continue working on it. And, I, as the CEO, will continue doing what I can to support it, even if I'm in personal risk. And I would rather go to jail than deal with a society that bans something like Cardano, because then I know that the government's lost legitimacy, and it's only a matter of time before it falls. At some point, you have to take a stand. Everybody has a threshold. Everybody has something. For me, about masks, I find myself not wearing a mask as much anymore. I used to do it because I said, okay, well, it calms people down and it's a sign of respect. And, perhaps it has some social benefit. And, maybe it does have a medical benefit. At least it can't harm, or at least it can't harm others. And then when 1,200 epidemiologists and doctors and other people signed a letter saying that we should allow these protests to continue and not cite coronavirus as a reason to stop them, but other protests are wrong. That's when that was my breaking point. I did a video on Periscope, and I basically said a threshold has been crossed, and all these people who assert to be medical experts have now lost legitimacy. I am not a doctor, but I know enough about medicine to know that viruses aren't smart enough to be able to decide what your politics are before they infect you and make decisions of whether your cause is just or not. The entire reason they said don't do these protests is that the young people doing protests, the middle-aged people doing protests, go home, and when they go home, they infect mom and dad and grandpa and grandma. And if we allow them to occur on a large scale, it could kill millions of people if coronavirus is deadly. Okay, well, I'll give you that. But then you can't say that protest A somehow won't do that, but protest B will. When protest A has hundreds of thousands of people densely packed together for hours, if not days, with limited personal protective equipment, sharing water bottles, sharing food, talking to each other without masks on, and that's completely fine and legitimate, no problem at all. And a lot of those people are very young, so they won't really feel sick, and they'll go out while sick. And they're poor, a lot of them. So they live with mom and dad. They live with grandma, grandpa. So wouldn't they spread the disease to all those people? So you're basically saying people who didn't consent to getting sick, people who weren't there in the protest expressing their voice, are now getting hurt. So for me, that was the threshold, and we all have thresholds, but that was the one where I said, okay, you've lost all legitimacy until you apologize and admit to the blood on your hands, or say that you lied about coronavirus being damaging or dangerous. You pick one, you have to pick it. You no longer have any legitimacy. You're now the Soviet Union during Chernobyl. Okay? For the rest of my life, I will believe that about these people. And at some point after investigations are held, they will be held accountable. If not through legal means, then through economic means, or through social shame. But I will never forget, ever. I'll be 70 and remember their names and use my considerable resources to make sure that everybody remembers them as well. It is morally wrong either to destroy the economy, killing millions of people through starvation and suicide and lack of medical treatment, or to, if they're right about it being a dangerous disease, okay, then to tell people it's okay to go spread that disease to the most vulnerable and weakest amongst us who did not consent to these things, or else they would be right there in the protest taking those things into their own hands. Both of these are wrong. Horrifically morally wrong. The minute they put their name on the letter, they have blood on their hands one way or the other. So that was a threshold for me. The banning of crypto is another threshold for me. I just won't consent. I don't want to live in a society that does these things, because none of this matters. Because the next thing they do is just take it from you. It's like being a Russian billionaire when Putin was purging people and consolidating power. If you weren't in his political inner circle, you get gulagged. Okay? They weren't nice guys, but they had these beautiful estates and all this stuff that had accumulated, and Maseratis and Ferraris and Lamborghinis and private jets. And they wake up the next day, they're in chains in a prison cell. It means nothing if you don't have rule of law and constitutional consistency, and that you actually have some notion of objectivity and truth. One of the things that's happened because of academia, a plank of academia, is there was a war on objectivity, and there was a war on truth. There was a war on established scientific process. And we just started getting to a situation where up is down, left is right. Things that we thought were true are no longer true, and they can be redefined arbitrarily many times. And if you disagree, you're a horrible, evil human being and must be destroyed, must lose your job. We are seeing people who oppose these protests now suffering fallout, where they just say, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea. You shouldn't pull these statutes. No, I'm sorry, you can't be a principal anymore. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't work for the Federal Reserve anymore. That's a threshold. And we're getting dangerously close to the same tactics that were used in totalitarian societies like the Soviet Union, where economists who were collecting data on how bad the Soviet economy was were deathly afraid to let any of that leak, because they knew they'd get gulagged if it got out. And they had to publish articles saying the opposite, knowing full well that they were fake. But they were scared of the consequences of saying the truth, or at least their perception of the truth. We should never aspire to live in a society that does this to people. And cryptocurrencies are basically an instrument of necessity. If the government was doing everything perfectly, people were trusting each other, working well together, and society was great, they wouldn't exist. They exist because we have lost the moral legitimacy and the stability that we've come to rely upon for society to function properly. And they'll continue to get stronger and more pervasive the more madness that we get. And at some point, you just have to make some decisions to disobey. And this is the great test of our time. Yeah, Cass, to your point about friends in Brazil digging holes by the thousands, if you're right, and okay, perhaps you are, or maybe that is the case, I'm not taking a position on it, then ask yourself, is it right then to say it's okay for millions of people without personal protective equipment to be densely packed together for hours and hours and hours, where they have a very high probability of exacerbating the epidemic, and then going home and spreading it to their parents and grandparents who weren't there and didn't consent to that. Is that a good thing? Is that morally justified? And as a public health official, is it your duty to say that they shouldn't do that and they should stop and find another way to express themselves? Or would you sign that document saying that that's okay? Why stay in the US then? Why not go somewhere else? Because it's my home. It's home of my father, home of my grandfather. You don't leave home. You make it better. You fight. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But if you just run away, it's cowardice. I don't have respect for people that go and expatriate. As bad as it gets, this is what I got. And I was born here. I'm an American. I'll die an American. I'll die on American soil, one way or another. And I hope it gets better, and I'll do what I can to make it better. But I'm not going to abandon the country that created me. Hi, Charles. I was thinking about buying a horse for myself and my daughter. What breed would you suggest? Well, Jim, how old is your daughter? Did you send the rock pie to that one kid, the Periscope video? Actually, we were going to send an Intel NUC to them, which is a much more powerful computer than a rock pie. It's of similar size, but Intel makes them. And I'll check with Rod Alexander about that, Justin. But I know that Rod had a chance to ping him and his son. And actually, I think we're going to invite them to come speak about their experiences at the virtual summit. But thanks for reminding me. I delegated it to Rod, and we'll make sure that we look into that. But I upgraded it from a rock pie to an Intel NUC. It's a few $100s more, but the kid can use it for a lot more than just staking ADA. So I figured, why not? 11 years old. You're okay. Might be a little big, but I love Frisians. Frisians are great horses. Uh, you know, quarter horses are good too. Arabians are quite nice. They're a little smaller. Mongolian ponies are so cool. I ride them all the time whenever I'm in Mongolia. They're the perfect size for an 11-year-old. They live a long time. They're real stubborn. But they're super loyal horses, and you can't kill them no matter what you do to them. They were built to survive in the harshest of conditions. So it's a good horse to have. Some breeds of horses are super pretty, but they're very temperamental and they have tons of health problems, just like dogs. Kauai or Maui? Maui. I was born on Maui. Maui pride. Have I ever been to Brazil? Yes. Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. I love Brazil. Do you have to get massive vaccine shots to travel Mongolia? No, not at all. Mongolia is a great place. Highly, highly recommend it. Traffic is terrible. I used to joke. I was half serious that it took me 4 hours to go from the airport to the center of Ulaanbaatar, which is only 20 kilometers. And I said, if this ever happens again, I'm just going to ride horses from the airport to the city. And by the way, you can do that in Mongolia. It's one of the few places. I'd have gotten there in about 2 hours on horseback. Frisians are very elegant. Have you ever ridden an Icelandic pony? No, I want to, though. They're beautiful. Charles, your fascination with the Middle East is intriguing. Is there any reason behind that? I'm not particularly fascinated over any other region. I mean, Mesopotamian culture was just absolutely extraordinary, and thousands of years of unique history there. And they, for their time, were the most sophisticated civilizations. How's Polymath going? I successfully completed my consulting agreement. I signed a 1-year agreement and completed that. And now they're building Polymesh, and I wish them well, and I think they're going to do a good job with it. Hope they do. Give them a lot of advice. Do you have a degree in history? Now, I studied mathematics, but I love history. There's a lot of magical things to do in history. Charles, have you ever been to Hydra? Yeah, Shanghai and Beijing. And that's pretty much it. Never in the countryside, unfortunately. Will ADA have STOs? Yeah, we will support permission to ownership for security tokens. What are your thoughts on Elrond? I don't know too much about the project, but they seem to have some good people, and they've been very nice to me. So I have nothing negative to say about them. And one of these days, when I have the time, I'll dig deeper into what they've done. There's just a lot of projects out there, and to do proper due diligence does take a lot of time. That said, you can tell a lot about a project based upon where they come from and their community and how friendly they are. And when they tend to be open, welcoming, and friendly, it's a good sign. It's a good first indication. What are your thoughts of Zaluk? Well, uh, they've been the opposite of Elrond. The only exposure I have are people who are in that community spamming my Twitter and Reddit and other things, basically telling me how they've already solved every problem that we seek to solve, and we're shit and they're great. I mean, if that's what you do, then I don't even take the time to read anything about you. I mean, congratulations, you've already beat me, so why do you even care? Charles, why 45 billion ADA? Because 49,999,999,999 ADA just was not enough. And 45 billion in one ADA was too much. Not an emotional reaction. What do you think about the merits of their work? Well, north of Eden, here's the problem. Time is finite, life is short, and there are thousands of cryptocurrencies, thousands of projects, and it does take quite a bit of time, effort, and opportunity cost to do diligence on a project. So I have to make decisions of, well, which ones do we look at? And obviously, if there's a strong commercial adoption of a project, regardless if I like it or not, I'll look into it because I want to understand, why are they successful and why did they achieve what they've achieved. But if they're a small project and they're not particularly successful in terms of network effect or value, then I have to have a reason to actually look into them. And either because I hear through the grapevine that there's something really interesting about what they've done, and usually it's because I'll read one of their papers, because there's all kinds of papers being published all the time to ePrint or some other source, and something will come to me and I say, oh, I really admire that. That's really cool stuff. Like Avalanche is an example of that. where I know him and I've met him many times. We talk over Twitter from time to time, and he's a good researcher and he writes good papers and he's a good booster of that project. So when I heard about it, I said, well, I should read the paper and I should look at what they're doing. And so I'll actually do a deep dive. But if I don't have a personal connection or I haven't seen anything that's from that side that really draws me in, the only reason I'll even look at it at that point is because I have positive, warm, fuzzy feelings about the community. And I say, well, there's got to be some reason why they're so nice and so interesting to talk to. Like Zencash is a great example of that. I really like Rob and Ralph and all the other people there. The Horizon community is wonderful. So I'll spend some time there. But if the community just shows up and says, we solved everything, you guys are all idiots, everything you've done is terrible, we're brilliant, you're stupid, why do you even bother? We're going to beat all of you. It's like, okay, all right, well, have a nice day. I just don't have time for it. Now, maybe that's naive. Maybe that's counterproductive. Maybe they do have all that stuff and their arrogance is justified. But then you have to ask, well, why haven't they gotten mass adoption and they're in the top 10 then? Charles, not sure if this has been answered yet, but will you be able to stake from the Daedalus mainnet? Yes, you'll be able to stake from Daedalus. You'll be able to delegate to a stake pool from Daedalus. There's a whole center for that, and Yoroi will also have those capabilities. Can arrogance ever be justified? Yeah, sure. There's plenty of super arrogant, brilliant people out there that do amazing work. And it's never a positive. It's one of those situations where they succeed despite themselves, not because of themselves. Arrogance will only ever hurt you. Doesn't help. You do have to have a lot of ego and a lot of personality to believe that you can run a company and you can succeed. When you walk into an endeavor that has a failure rate of more than 90% in 5 years, the fact that you succeed and other people don't, it has a bit of survivorship bias and ego attached to it. So you always have to keep that in check as a founder of a company and as a successful academic. Can you recommend any books or resource to study cryptography? Introduction to Modern Crypto from John Katz. Wonderful book. Probably the Bible of Introduction to Crypto. Hi, Charles. Are we expecting any updates on developer documentation soon? Yeah, around the 30th is when they're scheduled. We're working real hard on that. Have you ever heard of the Bolivian silver mine in Potosi? Yeah, Chiroricho, the mountain of silver. Also the mountain that eats men. Probably more have died there than any other place in Bolivia for mining. I have heard of it. It's also mentioned in The Ascent of Money. It's a great book. Come on, give me some good questions. What, Charles? What do you think about promoting Cardano in the chimpanzee community? Can can animals own Cardano? We actually thought about creating a token that would represent like a reverse life insurance policy, where a community would make money based on keeping certain rare animals alive. So it was basically an anti-poaching measure. So let's say you have a rhino, and as long as the rhino's walking around and living, everybody around the rhino who's in the neighborhood, who's like the custodian of it, will get a payment. But as soon as the rhino perishes, then the payment stops. So the community has basically a financial incentive to keep poachers out. So that's, I think, the closest you could ever get to animal ownership of a crypto. But it is an intriguing economic concept. If poaching is an economic phenomena, then anti-poaching should certainly be as well. And if the incentives are stronger on one side than the other, it should actually prevent it. How often do you check the top 10 coins? I check CoinMarketCap about once a day, sometimes twice, once in the morning, once at night, mostly because big movements in price are indication of some macro event or some news event. And so it's a good, super compressed way of looking at the industry from a slice and saying, did something happen? Like if we all go way into the red, or we're all way in the green, or one coin is just way up, then you say, okay, something happened. And then you can kind of dig into that. Yeah, by the way, that Internet Modern Crypto, get the second edition of Liddell and Yehuda Lindell and John Katz's book. The second edition is really good. First edition's fine too. Cody is coming to the summit. If you want to hear about what Cody's doing, attend the virtual summit. What is the meaning of life? Jordan Peterson used to say, find something that is so meaningful that any amount of suffering would be a small price to pay to do that thing. So that's probably the meaning of life. Which of the Millennium mathematics problems will be solved by blockchain? None. But if we do the Q-Adidas program, if we actually do that, it might actually create a strong enough incentive to bring enough people in to actually solve some of these Millennium problems. Well, hello from South Carolina. For those of us who plan on staking via Ledger, you'll be able to actually, in the hardware wallet center of Daedalus, stake with your Ledger device. Really like your AMA on the absurdity of CEOs trying to maintain a politically correct public face. And that's the problem, is like they have no values. Just be yourself. If you're going to go out there and lead people, they have to know who's there, and they have to know where you stand. They might hate you for it, but it ultimately is just a far better way of conducting yourself. And the other side of it is, if people accept you for who you are, you have a much stronger relationship and much more empathy with the people that you lead and you aspire to lead. And they're willing to give you a much better benefit of the doubt than if you're a hollow person who just uses corporate speak and diarrheas, all this nonsense that we've seen. It's really sickening. I have a friend in Silicon Valley who works in the HR department of a company there. And I won't mention the company, but he had an employee who dresses like a cat, wears ears, has a tail, all this stuff, come in and say, I'm going to sue the company unless you guys give me a litter box for the bathroom. And they caved. The CEO of the company caved. They actually, in one of the stalls, put a giant litter box, and this employee will go and use the litter box instead of the toilet because he thinks he's a cat. And they just caved. This is the world we're living in now. So if you live in California, you're part of that culture. You can get yourself a litter box if you identify as a cat. I know. And I know that the CEO thought that was batshit crazy, and then when asked publicly about it, said, we're very inclusive. We believe very firmly in a safe workplace, blah, blah, blah. Have the courage to say, no, you can wear the cat ears and the tail, but you can't defecate in a giant human-sized litter box. There are some thresholds you can't cross. And this is why we do the AMAs. Darko was supposed to have a demo during the May product update. The day of, he said, we're not ready for it. And I said, okay, do it when you're ready. And he's still working on it. They ran into some issues with unique device ID and some things on the Ledger firmware. And they're trying to work around the fact that the firmware doesn't have everything that we need. So the long-term solution is to update the firmware, which Vacuum Labs is currently doing. But the short-term solution is some sort of contorted workaround for the Hardware Wallet Center. But they'll get it done this month. It should happen. I was pretty sad about that too. I got a Ledger. If Cardano becomes big, he'll be attacked by the mainstream media as well. They'll go back many years and find something to talk about. Oh God, yeah, these AMAs are going to give them so much to talk about. I'm looking forward to a 5-10 second clips here and there of things that I've said being taken completely out of context or wholesale, just depending upon where you fall on the spectrum, and them turning me into the world's greatest monster, which is why you can never build a cult of personality around me, kids. Because if you have that, that's a vector of attack. So the burden is on us to make sure that we decentralize this thing, right? So when they take old Charles down, Ada's still going strong. Hey, Moth. How you doing, buddy? Look at that. He wants to join us. Bye, Moth. Can we build an AI like Prometheus that shows factual information like in the book Life 3.0? Ooh, that'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it? All right. What else you guys got for me? Does IOG have any desire to make hardware products? We already are. Charles, why not move Cardano to Puerto Rico? Act 20 is 4% business tax. Act 22 is 0% capital gains on tax and stocks. Yeah, there's a lot of IRS stuff you have to do, and I have to live in Puerto Rico half a year. I live in Colorado. I don't particularly care about the tax rate. I just pay what it is. It's my home. Can we decentralize that moth? Oh, believe me, there's a lot of them. They're very decentralized. They're everywhere, those damn moths. Charles, you mentioned in AMA a while back that you were working on a project as big as Cardano. Can you give us some more info on that? We are. And no, still working on it. It's very big. Have you read Nietzsche's book, Beyond Good and Evil? Yes. Also his other book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which inspired a lovely orchestra. Does 5G cause cancer? No evidence. Phone disagrees. Favorite computer scientist? Ooh, I would offend some people if I mentioned that. Actually, I think I can get away with this one. Kurt Gödel, technically a computer scientist. Any news from Steve Wolfram? Yes, he is attending the virtual summit, and he's going to do a lovely presentation. What's your opinion on von Neumann? Oh, he was a great guy too. Brilliant guy. Horrible human being. He harassed a lot of women, but a brilliant scientist and a brilliant mathematician. Even with a standard of his time, people considered him to be a bit too much. Do you like Ayn Rand philosophy? No. Do you like Trump? No. Man's bereft of integrity, bereft of depth. He's like everything that I stand against, bundled into a single human being. How horrible does the American political system have to be that a guy like Trump is a desirable alternative to the candidates we were given? It's really a reflection on how bad things have gotten rather than him as a leader. He doesn't read anything, doesn't care to read anything, operates on innuendo and heuristics that are well out of date and bad. And there's just no depth about him and no integrity about him. He can just sit and lie to your face. He brags about screwing people. Who brags about cheating people and defrauding people? You know, contractor comes to my house and says, I'm going to fix the windows. I say, great. Tell me how much it's going to be. They say this much. As soon as they're done, I pay them. And they say it's going to be X amount of dollars. I cut a check. A guy like Trump says, come fix my casino, come fix my tower. And they say, okay. They go and quote. He says, sure. They go do the whole thing. And he says, oh, I'm not going to pay you. Sue me. And then they get in this huge dispute, and he draws it out for a little while. And then eventually he says, I tell you, I'll give you 60% of what you bid just to make me go away. And they say, fine, go fuck yourself. And then he writes in his books, this is a good way of doing business. Would you do business with a guy like that who brags about how he was able to use the bankruptcy to be able to get rid of debt and these other things? And, you know, haha, I didn't have to pay that guy or made a good deal here. You know, there's just no character there. The Trump University thing was another really disgusting thing. You go to all these poor people and tell them you're going to teach them how to get rich. You know, we have a lot of that in our industry where you have these YouTubers or other people running around saying, oh, yeah, I'll teach you how to make tons of money with crypto. You know, just follow my investment scheme. Of course, it never works. No one has a silver bullet. And then he says, after you spend X tens of thousands of dollars, you'll have a chance to meet me. And at the end of the whole thing, they have a cardboard cutout of him. He couldn't even bother to actually meet the people who give him tens of thousands of dollars. Yeah. And so why do people vote for him or support him? Because it's a fuck you to the entire system. They say that we would rather have a clown to disgrace the office and disgrace the institutions than play the game anymore. And until the system understands that, we will continue having that. So don't like it, change it, and aspire to something better. And what we're being offered is just more of the same. 50 years in politics. 8 of the last 12 years was the number 2 guy, and that's change. They're not getting the lesson. So he's probably going to win re-election as a consequence. So maybe in 2024, both parties will actually understand that they have to change. And if they don't, we'll eventually be pushed to a civil war. And a lot of people will die. And it will be horrible for everyone. But that's what they want. Yeah, get rich gurus all over YouTube. There's tons of them, man. I tell you, anybody who tells you they're going to make you rich without hard work or getting lucky, don't listen to that person. Easy path to wealth is an easy path to getting your wealth taken away from you. Why did you choose Haskell over Golang? I just felt that it was a better programming language all in all for formal methods, the type of work we were doing, the fact that we were building a high assurance concurrent system. Go is a perfectly reasonable language. We used Go with the Ethereum project for the Go Ethereum, and other cryptocurrencies have used Go as well. If memory serves, I believe Cosmos is implemented in Go. And there's plenty of good Go developers out there. But for the type of work that we wanted to do, Haskell is the way to go. And we had to spend a lot of time, effort, and money to make that work for us. Favorite architect, Imhotep. Didn't expect that one, did you? How can we get term limits? Constitutional amendment. 2 terms in the Senate, 5 terms in the Congress. No more Pelosi's. No more McConnell's. Ha! I'm a scientist philosopher, and I'd like to know a little bit more why you prefer to use a Bacchus perspective using Haskell and not a typical formal method using structured programming. Ha 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 ha. You're a funny one. Actually, one thing I would love to do is, first off, have formal specs that are a little bit more useful. Right now, the formal specs are written in a way that are readable and easy to modify. They're written in LaTeX. We can't do code extraction or model checking with them. And that's quite unfortunate. And what we do is we write reference Haskell with the formal specs. TLA plus would be an option. I've always been a fan of temporal logics. But there are many ways to square that circle. And actually, we have a very good director of formal methods at IOHK, Philip Kahn. He started as a physicist. He actually worked at CERN. And somewhere along the way, he said computer science is just so much more cool than unlocking the mysteries of the universe. And he's actually built up a great center of excellence within our company. And he has a very diverse group of people in formal methods who love everything from Agda to Lean to other such things. And we've even created our own process calculus. It's a great group, and it's one of the hidden gems of IO Global. Charles, you're watching too much Silence of the Lambs? How do you figure? I'd tell you a UDP joke, but I don't think you'd get it. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, but if you do, you'll get it a lot faster than a TCP joke. What do you think about Trump's Tulsa event? I should have it. If we can protest, he can have those events. What's the difference? No difference. You've lost all moral authority. Politics is okay. It's the woke virus. Charles, why make things so difficult and complex with Haskell? Why not just keep it simple and build it in BASIC? Because code is read 10 times for every one time it's written. And if you ever want to maintain it, evolve it, grow it, or find problems in it, write it in a language that helps you with that, as opposed to a language that hinders you with that. Who are you going to vote for, Charles? Probably the Libertarian candidate. My vote doesn't count. Colorado's going to be blue. So no matter what I think, I have no voice. Zero. I'm not represented. I've never had in my lifetime a president I voted for win. My state is blue. So if I vote for Biden, well, then I'm just giving him a little bit more oomph for his victory. If I vote for Trump, well, doesn't matter. Vote for anybody else, doesn't matter. My vote does not count. Your vote does not count. Only a small group of Americans' vote actually counts. How fucked up of a system is that? And that's the one we live in. Is there any delay in mainnet launch? No. Charles, how do you explain consciousness? Actually, if you're really curious about that, I'd highly recommend you look to YouTube and Google Marvin Minsky. Marvin Minsky consciousness. He was a really famous computer scientist and AI researcher, and he has a great dialogue about that, and that he had shortly before he died. Marvin was a very brilliant man. Charles, are you woke? Well, Ariel, what do you think? Am I? Feel pretty woke. I don't know. Would you prefer a direct democracy like Switzerland? Switzerland doesn't actually have a direct democracy. It's a far more nuanced system. They don't even have a president. They actually have a committee that leads the country, and it's a cantonal confederacy. What do you think about Justin Trudeau losing $1 billion over a UN council seat? Well, if they ever find his testicles, let me know. He's not a man. Something else. Not a big fan of Trudeau. And I think he's actually Castro's kid. I saw those pictures. I'm pretty convinced of it. Charles, do you think Hitler fled to Argentina? The FBI thought so. Who knows? If he did, they probably would have found him. The Israelis would have found him. They were pretty vicious about that one. They scoured all of South America looking for Nazis. I spoke about Trudeau being Castro's kid online, and the Canadian Secret Service came to my workplace. No, I don't believe that. I want to believe that's true, John. I really do, but I don't. I can't. I'm sorry. Canada's not that aggressive. What, did they just come up on a moose? I'm sorry. You can't go after our leader. Have some maple syrup. When will Eos die? Oh, Eos will never die. Dan Larimer will just leave it, and then Justin Sun will take it over. He'll create Eos 2, Wrath of Dan. Canadians are apparently Kermit the Frog. No, I just do that for my Canadian impersonation. My chief of staff, Tamara Hassan, she's Canadian, and I always have so much fun picking on Canada, and she hates me for it. I get into some lovely conversations from time to time, picking on lovely Canada. Although Canada actually one of the most beautiful countries I've ever been to, and yeah, there's actually my favorite steakhouse in the entire world is there, Jacobs and Co. It's in Toronto. There's a lot of great things. I love Vancouver. It's a beautiful city as well. Your thoughts on Elon Musk and the work he's doing on Neuralink seems interesting. Yeah, yeah. It's one of those things that when you get onto like a 18, 24-month evolution cycle and you tether it to something really good, uh, you like restoring paralysis, or dealing with epilepsy, then within just 10 or 20 generations, it will become a consumer product. And then at that point, it's a game changer for all of humanity. Give us telepathy, a massive amount of data retention, ability to transfer complex thoughts. I'm transferring information to you guys, and I'm doing that through speech. So my brain is firing and I'm thinking, and then it translates to some muscular processes. And then basically I'm blowing air through my mouth and vocal cords. And this is creating sound in a very particular way. It goes here, it goes to you. And that's a super, super low tech, low bandwidth medium, and language is required to make that understandable, and language has all this ambiguity. So complex concepts require enormous amounts of effort to encode and decode and decipher. And there's lots of misconceptions that occur or misinterpretations that occur. Okay, well, if you have Neuralink, I can just think of a complex concept and send it to you wholesale, and you receive it with no necessary changes, and you just get it. So, if I wanted to talk about Hilbert's Nullstellensatz, and show you how to prove that, just something in the algebra world that you learn in grad school, I could just be like, boom, and you get, oh, wow, that's really cool. That's amazing. It's a hidden gem of mathematics. And normally it'd take you about 3 months to understand it. And you just get it. So think about what that does to the world when something like that comes out. It changes everything, absolutely everything. William Shatner is more knowledgeable about crypto than half of crypto Twitter. Yeah, Shatner is really smart. I had a chance to meet him and have dinner with him down in Mexico, and Bill is really up to date. Guy's in his 80s, and he's sharp as hell. I love William Shatner. I really do. Charles, did you do consultancy anymore? I put it on hold during the coronavirus. I was probably going to make between $1 to $2 million consulting this year, and then all of that got ended because of coronavirus. It's usually what I make doing it. And so next year, get back to it. What was your first job? The first job I really liked, I actually built replica Rolexes for a guy from Senegal. He would give me a bunch of these counterfeit watches, and I would upgrade them and put Swiss movements into them. I was 17 at the time. I'd put ETA 2836 movements in, and then legit and aftermarket bezels and crowns, and the right sapphire with the right magnification of Cyclops. It's 2.5x for the Rolex Submariner, and get bracelets in that actually had a proper weighting, so that they felt like that they were gold. They were triple wrap gold plated with lead. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I love watches, and to have a job at so young and be paid to basically build them without a degree in horology, that was fun. Favorite watch company? Jaeger-LeCoultre is probably the best engineering company at the moment because of the gyro tourbillon. Vacheron Constantin, in my view, makes the prettiest skeleton watches. Jaquet-Droz makes the best automatons. Their minute repeaters that they do, the bird repeater, is unbelievable, and all of the repeaters that they do are unbelievable. Hublot is fun. You can throw them at people. That's the rapper watch, the iced Hublot with gold. It's like a heavy watch to have. Piaget makes this beautiful thing called the Altiplano, and it's the thinnest mechanical watch I think you can buy right now that's an automatic. The weights on the back actually have to be made out of platinum because gold is not heavy enough. It's not dense enough. You made Rolexes. Yeah, fake Rolexes. I would upgrade them to have Swiss movements in them. It was fun. I didn't sell them. I just worked on them. Whatever happened after that was someone else's business. I've had a unique life, kids. I also worked at a KFC Taco Bell. That was a less desirable job. It didn't even have the dignity to be a proper KFC. It had to be a Taco Bell as well. Made the chicken, and I was really bad about it. I almost burnt myself with an exploding chicken cooker. The extra greasy chicken, the extra crispy chicken for KFC. You're supposed to open up the top on the fryer for the second round of frying that you do for it. Well, I left it on and actually built up too much pressure, and it exploded. And all this grease came over the whole back of the kitchen, and I had to jump out of the way of it. That was fun. It broke my glasses. Charles looks like a Russian gangster without the glasses. He has to keep them to avoid scaring people. Yeah, so I went with the John Lennon look instead. Will you ever wear contacts or do LASIK? Nope. No. I'll only replace my eyes when that's good. Otherwise, I'll just go blind, and then somebody will read to me. Funny, Jack Ma got declined for a job at McDonald's. Look at him now. Otis, Jack, he has this amazing life story. He's like, I tried 17 times for this, and then I applied for Harvard 12 times, and then I went to McDonald's, and they rejected me, and then I was drugged and woke up in a bathtub missing a kidney. But then they gave me the kidney back because they rejected it and said it wasn't a good enough kidney. Then I had to find somebody who would put the kidney back into me, but then 12 surgeons wouldn't do it. So I had to do it myself with dental floss. And I still have that floss kidney. I'm not really exaggerating very much when you listen to Jack Ma talk. That guy is so much fun. uh, and now he's crazy rich. But he's crazy rich in China. That's not a good deal. If the government turns against you, you're disappeared. The first thing I think I would do if I was a Chinese billionaire is move to Switzerland and rescind my citizenship. Yeah, true that, KB. Do you think a resource-based economy would work? Ray, do you remember that guy? He's the weird French or whatever dude. He's bald. Venus Project or something like that. Can somebody look him up? I wish I had Jamie. I'd be like, Jamie, can you look up that Venus Project guy? Joe Rogan. He's got a good crew. I got to hire a crew for this shit. You guys having fun? I'm having fun. Looking good. Well, you're looking good too, Johnny Walker. Thank you. I'll be your Jamie Charles. Okay, well then, MGLZMD. I'm just going to call you M. M, can you look that up? Venus Project. Who's that short, bald guy that runs it? Resource-based economy. Charles, have you ever met Peter Thiel? Yeah, he's a nice guy. What cigars do you smoke and what alcohol do you fancy? I already answered the alcohol, so you're going to have to refer back. For cigars, Hemingways, Arturo Fluente Hemingways, they're like $10, super cheap. You can buy them off the back of a golf cart when you're golfing. The drink girl will sell them to you, and they're just great. The short stories are just great. Perfect cigar for a single setting. Jacques Franco, yeah. Jacques Fresco. Yeah, the Venus Project, exactly. He once went to see Boulder. I saw him speak. He died a few years ago, too? Oh, no. When did he die? Yeah, he was talking about all these buildings that you can make out of like metal that had memory and they could self-assemble right out of the box. Super creative, nice guy. When did he die? That makes me sad. I didn't even know. Are you listing Shelly on Binance? Cardano is already on Binance. It's our #1 trading exchange. Seems like nobody cares if ITN ADA takes value from ADA in the market. Well, Sato, it has to be traded first, ITN ADA, and it's not. And if it is traded, it will only occur if there is real independent use and utility for that chain. So that's a long way from happening. And every ADA holder's got an opinion about it. Thoughts about Mike Tyson getting back in the ring? Well, if those fight videos are to be believed, he's looking like a pretty good fighter. He's not looking like 20s Mike Tyson, but he looks maybe like 40s Mike Tyson. I think it's going to be fun. Have you harvested any jalapeno peppers? Yes, sir, I have. And they are good. Please, for the love of all things holy, have you had any results from the brainwave device you bought a couple of weeks ago? No, I stopped using it. Thoughts about Singularity.net. Ben speaks very highly of Cardano. Yes, he's actually coming to speak at the virtual summit, and I'll have a one-on-one with him, and hopefully we can get Singularity Net on Cardano. That'd be very, very fun. And actually, Ben's kid is an incredibly talented Haskell programmer. Small world, huh? He's a good man. I was a huge fan of OpenCog. It's a great framework. Yeah, we're bringing everybody to the virtual summit. Come on now. It's a fun thing. Do you consider Pluto a planet? We're not even going to have that debate. We're not even going to have that debate, sir. No. Where can I find a good biography on you? I haven't done enough stuff yet. At some point, somebody will write one about me, and it'll be like one of those choose your own adventure books. You just decide what my background is. I'll just go with it. And that's when I wrote The Birdcage, when I had a 2-year gay relationship with Robin Williams. Have you ever read George Orwell? Yep. Mandatory reading for these days. Phil Zimmerman. Yes, I've met Phil many times. Last time was at Eurocrypt in Israel. He's a really bright guy. I'd love to work with him on another PGP standard. One of these days we'll get around to it. It would be amazing if you had a reality TV show about your career and farm. I actually have been offered 2 different reality TV shows. I've had various people reach out to me, and I've turned them both down. I think the AMAs are a lot more fun. Will the Ethiopia gals be at the virtual summit? Yeah, some of them will be. Your dad's a doc. Do you have any brothers and sisters? I have an older brother. His name's William, and he is also a doctor. He's doctor of internal medicine in Gillette. Were your parents in the military? My mom was in the Army. She was an Army mom. Have you ever been to Nigeria or South Africa? Yes, to both, Lagos, and I've also been all throughout South Africa. And actually, I'm friends with the Ramaphosa family, Tumelo in particular. And I stayed at Fala Fala once, which is his dad's ranch. The Ramaphosas are currently Cyril is currently the president of South Africa. Have you considered shaving your beard just for fun? Sato, I have already done that. Get with the times, man. There are plenty of videos about shaving Charles. Have you ever read Jorge Luis Borges? Yeah, he did the that Infinite Library book, and then several others. If you're a mathematician, that's required reading as well. That in Flatland. Livy or Tacitus? Oof. What about Cicero? No, Livy the Elder. Yeah, he was a historian. Character class you'd pick in D&D. Well, if we talk in 3rd edition, the Scions, sir. Yeah, psionics for the win. And obviously the intelligence scion, the shaper. What's up with that? If the community wrote custom quests for Legends of Valor, would you put the top 10 in the game? Actually, I am going to put custom characters in the game from people I've met in life, good and bad. I might put Dan Larimer and Vitalik in the game. And yeah, if the community went ahead and wrote some quests, I would be happy to put some of those community quests in if you guys voted on it. Very soon, Cardano will have a voting system, and I might actually submit some ballots for that. People could have some ideas and characters they want to put in for various stake pool operators and ambassadors and other major people in the Cardano community. It would be fun to have you guys design your own character for the game and have it forever immortalized within that game. Beware pissing off a game developer, because we can do all kinds of things. Alexander the Great or Caesar? Which Caesar? You're talking probably about Julius Caesar or Augustus Caesar. Julius, if he lived long enough, probably would have vastly surpassed Alexander. And if Alexander lived longer, he probably would have vastly surpassed Genghis Khan. So, it's one of those tricky things where all great conquerors are always undone by death. Newton or Euler? Euler, come on now. Euler, we always got to represent the home team. I didn't study physics. Babel's Library. That's right. Yeah, and they had that cult looking for the index. That was required reading. Math is physics. No, physics is math. Got it the other way around, son. A character that's a literal pile of shit named Greg Wright. We can have him. We'll just call him Craig W, and we'll have him as the stable guy. And basically all he does in the game, like 24/7, is just shovel shit into a wagon, and then he just claims that he's written all the famous books in the game. Oh, this is going to be fun. I'm going to get sued. What math problem would you like to have solved? I would have loved to have solved the Goldbach conjecture. I might go back into mathematics to give it another shot now that I have damn near unlimited resources to pursue these things with anger. It's just a beautiful problem. It says any even integer, the binary Goldbach conjecture says any even integer 4 or greater is equal to the sum of 2 prime numbers. And there's just a richness about that problem because it's making a statement about a general factorization, because any even number is just 2 times an arbitrary factorization to a specific type of factorization. So there's a whole class of problems that are kind of like that, like Collat's conjecture, which says that if you have an even number, you divide it by 2. If you have an odd number, you times it by 3 and add 1. And the conjecture is that if you generate a sequence of numbers, that sequence will always be finite. And it kind of makes sense because you're saying, all right, if you ever hit a power of 2, then, and that's a trap, it'll go all the way down to 1, and then 1 goes back to 4, 2, 1. So it creates a finite sequence. They're called hailstone sequences. So when you look at the division by 2, that's kind of the multiplicative side, but that +1, it changes the factorization. And so if you can solve Goldbach, you probably would understand why Collatz is true or false. They're somewhat similar problems to each other. It's a field of mathematics called additive number theory, and there's a lot of magic there. And all those problems are just impossible to solve. People work on them for decades and they make very little progress. However, if you do solve it, it's like an insta Fields Medal. And if you're old, then it's an insta Abel Prize. But it's like you become a big guy or gal in mathematics. But everybody's super skeptical. You're just like, oh yeah, I have a solution for Goldbach conjecture. You're like, okay, just nobody reads them because nobody thinks you can solve it. Unless you're Terry Tao or something like that. And generally how you would solve something like that is that you would build this massive scaffolding of papers and you'd slowly work your way up to some sort of solution, kind of like what Wiles did with Fermat's theorem. Spent 20 years on that, and he had to build all this crazy stuff to get there. Thoughts on the E8 theory, where you can actually have a unified field theory with Lie algebras. It's a beautiful picture. If you guys Google E8 physics and click images, you can actually see the E8 complex. Talisi, or whatever his name is, has it. Napoleon or Simon Bolivar. Napoleon. What's the longest you ever worked on a single math problem? I thought about Goldbach off and on for 8 years. Seriously thought about it for 2. I really wanted to solve that problem. It was my white whale. I really wanted to solve it. It was something so fundamental and so simple. In mathematics, you develop a relationship with certain ideas and problems, and they become like your friends, and you go and have a conversation with them from time to time. And, and when you solve it, actually, it's like your friend dies. You never quite have another problem that means as much to you. So in a way, you don't want to solve it, but on the other hand, you want to. And when you get there, if you're so privileged to get there, then it's something that's so indescribably beautiful. This is why, I love mathematics so much. Now, there's an unlimited amount of problems to work on. You can do whatever you want for the rest of your life and touch only a very small part of a very, very small part of a very small part of a massive thing. But emotionally, there's only a few that you'll ever find that you just like, they mean a lot to you. Understanding details and nuances of the monster group and the surreal numbers was something that Conway was obsessed with. We all know him from Conway's Game of Life, but that was his white whale. And he didn't live long enough to actually see all the things that he wanted proved. Kind of sad. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. Have you ever heard of BitNation? Yeah, that was Susan Templehoff's thing. Charles, is Lisk a dead project? You've been a consultant. That's why I'm asking. I did consult for a little bit. I actually stopped consulting because they weren't using me. I became a consultant. They never called me and they never did anything, and they were paying me. And I was like, guys, what do you want to do? And the straw that broke the camel's back was that they went out and got some university relationship, and they never once even consulted me on it. I was like, guys, I could have negotiated this with you and saved you a bunch of money. So I actually just left. And I gave back the rest of the money. I didn't complete the full year, and I wrote an open letter about it. And I wish him well. Max is not a bad dude. He's actually quite a nice person to talk to in person. But I never really understood where they would like to go with it. So I couldn't really add a lot of value to it. When do you see the African Farmer Voucher Program coming together on Cardano? We're still bidding on that voucher program. We were supposed to have a final decision, but then the government delayed the bid by about 2 weeks. So hopefully we at least get an understanding if we were accepted or not, and then we'll begin negotiations for the final contract. Charles, has the ABC conjecture really been solved? Yeah, has Nietzsche done it? publishing it in his own journal. It didn't really help his case that he refused to leave Kyoto and not go lecture about it. The problem with his proof is it's just simply too complicated, and people have had to spend years working their way slowly through his paper. And there's been some concerns, but I don't think there's consensus in the mathematical community one way or the other. But the general consensus is that he was naughty because he needs to do better at explaining things. Who's your favorite old school wrestler? Oh, come on now. Macho Man Randy Savage. Tried any Ethiopian coffee lately? The stuff that you drink outside of the country is better than the stuff inside of the country because of the import-export laws that they have. It's the great irony of Ethiopia. They're one of the largest producers in the world of coffee, and you get coffee, and the coffee you buy outside of the country is better. It's crazy. Has Halo been peer-reviewed? I don't think it was accepted in any conference, but people are working on it. Charles, has golden ratio been implemented anywhere? Cardano? Yes, some of the artwork that we've done, especially the Cubal stuff that we do on the Cardano roadmap for the pictures of Shelley and Ada and so forth. There's a lot of golden ratio stuff in the art. Rogan after Gogan. See, you're starting to get it. If you have a slogan, people get it. Remember Moonwalking with Einstein. Great book. Shelley ships June 30th, not the 29th. July 29th is the date you're referring to, and that's the hard fork date. The backup ship date is the 7th of July if for some reason something goes wrong with the testing that we're doing this upcoming week. A2 Charles? Hey, Charles, how's your mental and physical health going? Yeah, pretty good. Got a chance to catch up on all my stuff this year. Things look pretty good. I had a botched cholesterol test, and I redid it, and now it's normal again. What happened was that they left my labs out in the sun, just in the truck or something, and everything went weird. And so they said, hey, you need to come back and take more blood out of you. It's like, you got 11 vials last time, guys. When will the pandemic end? That's a good way to end the AMA. So, guys, here's my prediction. Government's too far along. Every politician's too far along. They need an out. So here's how they get their out. They are going to wait till the vaccine's available. And then after the vaccines had some time to percolate, then they'll say, everything's cured. Everything goes back to normal. Okay. Mission accomplished. We saved all these lives. Look at that. And we got 3 vaccines right now that are in phase 2, which means that they've already cleared their safety trials and now they're in their efficacy trials. And the US government is mass manufacturing those vaccines already. So should they clear the efficacy trial, they will be available immediately after they clear that trial. The soonest that can happen is Q4 of 2020, more likely than not Q1 of 2021. And then the minute that's out, life gets back to normal and we move on. It won't all be the same, but at least we'll be able to stop wearing these damn muzzles. Okay, well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you taking the time to be with me. I always have fun being with you. And these were some good questions. Wrap things up. The next week is going to be a good week. A lot of testing, a lot of doing. Balance check is going to occur. We got probably a vote happening sometime next week or the week after. And a lot of people are working really hard right now to try to get all this stuff out, get things done. Shelley is imminent, and July Summit is imminent. It's going to be an experience, I think, that we all earned as a community. And I look forward to seeing what happens with the ITN, and I look forward to seeing Shelley out there and all these small business owners take over and be able to actually do something productive and great for all of us. And I look forward to Gogan coming out, and I look forward to keep working with all of you. It's been fun, and it's going to continue being fun. Cheers.